Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James and I'm your host. I am the founder of stelliumastrology.com and obviously the presenter of this podcast. And I'm also a tutor at the London School of Astrology, currently creating courses for them and creating a course on Lilith for the London School of Astrology China branch. Which will be going out in May sometime. So looking forward to that because I've already got quite a big Lilith course that I've created for the London School of Astrology, but I'm really delving deeper into Lilith and really learning an awful lot more about her. And when I say learning, it's like tuning into Lilith and identifying how it is that I connect with her, so I can show you how I do that so you can do it yourselves. So I'm really looking forward to that going out because it's such an interesting topic and it's such a it's difficult to find good information about her out there. It's really hard to interpret Lilith because she's just not really a typical body, so to speak. Anyway, so yeah, I'm doing that with the London School of Astrology, and if you're just tuning in, you've never listened to this podcast before, I also used to write horoscopes for Elle magazine and a number of other publications, and I've submitted my articles and been published all over the place, and we're just talking generally, we're doing a kind of series on how to learn astrology, really, what each kind of the building blocks of astrology are, and we're currently working through the house system, well, the houses, but you know, it's not an exhaustive kind of course. There's plenty more to be learnt. I always give you book recommendations if I can. I've got a few that I always seem to recommend, which is the Contemporary Astrologer's Handbook, Keywords for Astrology by Banzaf and Habler. At the moment, I'm recommending The 12 Houses by Howard Zasportis. There's Get to the Heart of Your Chart, or Getting to the Heart of Your Chart by Frank Clifford. There's also a book on the Midheaven by Frank Clifford as well, which is really great. He's got a load of books. I would recommend just getting them all because they're all brilliant. I think Frank is a really, really accessible learning resource, Frank himself. You know, the things that he has to say, the way he interprets the craft for the layman is very accessible, and he's just such a likeable person at the same time. So very easy to get in touch with astrology with Frank, who is the principal of the London School of Astrology, which is a place where I studied and, as you know, now teach. So I just wanted to say hello to Erica. Hi, Erica. Thank you so much for signing up as a patron. If I haven't already said hello on this podcast, because I film these here and there, record them here and there, so I don't always remember everything that I've covered. But I just wanted to say hello to Heather. Thank you for signing up as well to be my Patreons, my patrons. I've got Holly as well, who I just wanted to say hello to, who's signed up. And Cara, who has had a chart done quite a few times on this podcast, and has recently come for a reading with me, and has sent me an email, and I promise I'm going to respond. I probably will have responded by the time you hear this episode, Cara. But yes, so Cara signed up as well, and Maria as well, who is a client, a student, and also a patron of mine and a listener of this podcast. I'm so grateful to all of you for your support, and believe me, the benefits for being my Patreons, first and foremost, is that, you know, you are directly helping me to do this and to do what I love, because it's really hard to do something that isn't something that they tell you is a career when you go to career studies teachers at schools and things like that. Gosh, if I can't imagine the conversation I'd have had with my career study teacher if they'd have said, what do you want to do when you get older? I know I told them I wanted to study the planets, but they they told me that there weren't enough people interested in the astronomy course, so I couldn't do that, which was a shame because I would have loved to have studied that. But yeah, that's all I could think of. I just didn't know what else I wanted to do. I was into music. I was playing instruments, and I was into planets. So I was a bit, I know there's other people out there like me, but maybe not so many. Lots of people had lots of good ideas about what they wanted to do with their career path, with their future, and I just had no idea. So you guys, all of my patrons, are making it possible. But not only that, you're getting bonus content, videos about me, videos about what I'm up to, videos when I get inspired to make something, just to share with you, like lunar gestation cycles, for example. I've got another idea for a video on planetary phases, not just moon phases, but planetary phases. So lots of little things like that, little downloads. But also you get a discount on readings. So my VIPs are getting 25% off readings, and my BFFs are getting 15% off. So it's just really great to be able to offer value to you guys, and in turn you guys are showing me that you appreciate what I'm doing, by just being there and being on my Patreon page and being involved. So I just want to say a great big thank you to you guys, and you make it, not just you guys, all the listeners of this podcast. Every time when I log into my dashboard and I see how many downloads I've had for my podcast, it just blows me away. Actually, I just feel overwhelmed with the fact that I'm getting so much reach and so many people are downloading. It's been such an incredible experience. So, enough of that now, enough of that gooey, mushy stuff of me just telling you guys how much I love you. Today we're talking about the 5th house and the 11th house. So we've moved on from the 4th, which is home and family and roots, and the 10th house, which is kind of, career and our aspirations and who we aspire to be, the people that we look at that we think, I love that person's qualities, I want to be like that person, or I want to do what they do, that kind of emulative quality that we kind of, experience when we finally meet somebody who kind of embodies that essence that we really resonate with. And like I said, if you meet somebody that you really admire, it's because the qualities they have are something that are within you. And obviously as well, the 4th house and 10th house cusp is also known as the midheaven and the imum celi, or the medium celi and the imum celi, or the MCIC axis, which is known as the parental axis as well. So it's really, really important point in the chart. But we move on to the 5th house and the 11th house, which is we're taking a step away from home and family and our roots, and what we're doing is we're stepping out into the world from the 4th to the 5th house and finding out about ourselves in a much more independent way. So really the 5th house and the 11th house are about our individuality and our place in the world. So how we develop a sense of who we are and really work on our own personal likes and dislikes, and how we really establish ourselves as an individual, and then how we kind of find out where we fit into the world in that way, how we carry our gifts out into the world, and how we utilize them. So the 5th house is kind of also known as a house of, it's connected very much to the sign of Leo and the sun. Now, it doesn't mean that, if you've got something in the 5th house, you're naturally going to be a Leo about it. Or that, it's just an interesting place. There's an interesting correspondence between the sun and Leo in the 5th house. They're related, but they're not all the same thing. And usually the houses indicate the areas of life in which we are expressing whichever planets we have there. So for the 5th house, it might be that we do have to, it's a very creative place, because there's that whole creativity that comes with that solar quality, with that Leo quality. So it may be that, you are somebody that does have to play like a Leo would, like the Sun Tarot card, that child riding on the back of the horse, that lovely tarot card that whenever it gets pulled out of the deck, the reader will go, oh, isn't that a wonderful card to get in your reading? That's kind of a 5th house zone. You kind of have that sense of that wonderful, playful essence. I think in one of the books, I think in Howard Sportus's book, He describes the fifth house as a little bit like the sand pit when you're a child, and how you play in that sand pit, whether you're sociable, whether you're shy, whether you've got confidence in what you do, and whether you're, willing to be different to the other children and build something completely out there and different, or whether you want to just fit in and do what other people do. If you've got, planets which are, things like Venus or Jupiter, like benefic planets, which are, generally quite happy to express themselves in a kind of a beautiful way, you may find yourself really embodying this beautiful creativity of the fifth house. However, if you've got planets that are a bit harsher, like, Saturn, for example, or maybe you've got Chiron in the fifth house, you may struggle a little bit with your self-expression. I, speaking as somebody with Saturn, if we're using the equal house system, I'm somebody with Saturn in my fifth house, and I've struggled a lot with having confidence to go out there and be who I am. It really has been very difficult, even down to, I have got a Venus-Saturn square, which is generally connected to low self-esteem, and also a Mercury-Saturn square, which is a kind of connected to that sense of imposter syndrome, if anybody knows what I mean by that. Just that sense of you find yourself in a situation, you think, I don't deserve to be here, I don't know why these people think I'm good enough. You develop, you can work on that stuff, you really can, and you can really build your confidence. But having Saturn in the fifth house, it is a difficult place to truly express yourself, and actually in that respect, when you do have a difficult planet like Saturn, or like Chiron, an asteroid who is very there's a sense of pain, or a lack of ability to express itself in its true form, wherever you find Chiron in the chart. It can be very difficult to trust your own creative potential, or maybe you're good but you just don't have the confidence to put it out there because you struggle with criticism, or it could be that you are scared of having the attention when people go, wow, that's actually really good, wow, you're really good and naturally talented with this. It's a funny thing, confidence. And I would say that the fifth house does describe a lot about how confident we feel in ourselves, in our own skin, and how we relate to other people because of that confidence or lack thereof. And just to point out to you that we did talk about the third and ninth house axis, and the ninth house is in a harmonious aspect from the ascendant, so it's 120 degrees away. And the fifth house also happens to be 120 degrees away from the ascendant and first house. So it's considered to be, trine to the ascendant. Therefore, the fifth house and the ninth house, which also, whatever sign you've got on the ascendant, if we're using equal houses, by the way, whichever sign you have on the ascendant, for argument's sake, let's say we've got Aries on the ascendant, then the fifth house cusp ruler will be a fire sign Leo, and the ninth house cusp ruler will be a fire sign Sagittarius. So they work together in an elemental way. They understand, and they work in a cohesive way in order to enable self-expression and growth. So it's nice to think of the chart in a way that there are certain houses that kind of really cooperate with the ascendant and with the personality, the direct, immediate experience of life, the outlook and the perspective, the point of view. And when you've got something like the fifth house feeding into the first house, there could be a real creative sense of individuality as far as dress sense is concerned, because the first house will describe how we kind of adorn ourselves, and the fifth house is kind of how creative we are. Every single sign, every single planet, and every single house has its own individual creativity, I would like to point out. However, the fifth house is where we really develop a sense of our own personal individuality, and that is through being creative and developing a sense of play about life. And I do have stuff going on in my fifth house. But I don't think I really understood what they meant about the childlike play element of the fifth house until my sister had my first niece. And I knew people that had children before, but when you have a niece or somebody who comes into your life who you see the world through a child's eyes again, you suddenly understand what they mean about like the rediscovery of everything and the amazement and the fun factor, and watching a child play as well is so fascinating, and seeing how they explore the world in a playful kind of environment. And there's an advert on TV, I saw it the other day, and it really made me laugh. I cannot remember what the advert was. I think it was for an electric car, and there was a girl and she was standing there, and suddenly she was like, had all these electrical sparks coming off of her, and she was raising her hands up, and she looked a bit like Storm from X-Men. And then she put her hands on the car and was pretending to put electricity into the car while her dad was like charging it. And I just turned around to my partner and went, isn't it funny when you're a child, you really can see that stuff in your head. You really think you're like generating all this electricity. And, you just, in your head, you're there's limitless potential. And I think maybe that's part of what the fifth house is about. It's about potential. Because when you're playing, when you're embracing that childlike quality, if you've got positive role models, if you've got people around you who do not limit your ability to dream and to think about what you could be when you get older, the potential is you could be whatever you want. So I think that that's the power of the fifth house. The fifth house is also connected to like passions and fun, and not just like, passions as in like hobbies. I'm talking, love affairs, things where we like, we can enter into flirtation, where we literally do things because we kind of just want to enjoy the pleasures. So there is a sense of, just really connecting with joy. And the fifth house is a place of joy for us in astrology. So it's nice to have that ascendant relationship with the fifth house if we're using that equal house system, where all the chart is divided up equally. So like all the slices of the pizza are perfectly cut into exact slices. So you're having the first slice, which is at the kind of the left hand side, almost 9 o'clock position, and then you're having that fifth slice, which is where you go around the bottom of the pizza in an anti-clockwise way, get to that slice which is 5 away from the initial slice that you took, and or technically if you've taken that slice, then it's 1, 2, 3, and then the next one along. And just know that those two houses work together in a sense of joy and finding what makes us truly happy. So there's a real sense of allowing yourself to experience happiness and pleasure. And anybody who's got kind of fifth house placements are probably going to be working in areas where play is, or not necessarily working, but finding themselves in areas of their life where play is kind of promoted. So it could be theatre, it could be working, I would say kind of like maybe nurseries and things like that are more connected to a third house thing, because there's sort of a learning environment. However, it's very small children, so you could find yourself working with children in some way, or being around children, childminding, running a play group, after school activities, fun stuff like Sing and Sign, which they do in the UK, which my niece absolutely loves, and she went to it about 3 or 4 times. It's that developing yourself socially and enjoying, just doing the stuff that really makes you happy. And it could be down to things like you could, for example, you could have Pisces on your fifth house cusp, and you might just really enjoy going swimming. That might just be a thing that you just love. You just love to do, maybe, or perhaps playing football might be fun for you if you've got a bit of Pisces, because Pisces does rule the feet. It rules the flippers, it rules the feet, so there could be that aspect of it. So it's a really nice, the fifth house is a really nice place to have some nice planetary placements. It's difficult when you've got Saturn there, like I said, or anything that kind of causes you to be a bit overthinky or challenge yourself or self-critique, because it can be very hard for you to allow yourself to express yourself very publicly, or just express yourself full stop. I will say that I taught myself how to play guitar. I think I can't remember how old I was when I started learning. I think I might have been about 13, possibly. I know I've written it down in my diaries, but I went to the library and I got a book from the library and I taught myself chord patterns, pre-internet days. Internet was coming, but not quite at that point. I mean, I think it was around, but it wasn't what it is today. And I got a book from the library and I learnt some of the basic chords, and there were a few songs that I just knew how to play over and over again, and I must have driven my mum and dad bonkers. I've got Saturn and Pluto, Saturn and Pluto straddle my fifth house cusp, and I've also got my moon in Scorpio in the fifth house as well, using equal house system. And I would be playing guitar and somebody would come, I'd hear somebody take a step downstairs and I'd freeze. And I'd think, I don't want them to hear me. I just don't want them to hear me. And, it just went on for years. And then I remember going into school one day and they said, oh, do an assembly and, play a song in assembly. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe. And there was a couple of other girls with me who agreed that they would do it too. And so I thought, brilliant, there's a few of us, we'll be okay. And they both called in sick on the day of the assembly and left me to go up on stage and play guitar in front of the whole school myself. And everybody was really complimentary. And they really, I think I played Jimi Hendrix or something. I can't remember what I played. I think I played Foxy Lady. Went to an all-girls school and I was up there in my little school uniform playing a bit of, psychedelic Hendrix. It was such a scary experience. It was horrible. I didn't enjoy it at all, and it just stopped me from wanting to ever do something like that again. I have been able to perform since. I have done some open mic nights and stuff. My problem was that I ended up going out with a guy who, for a long time, was an absolutely incredible musician. He was signed to Sony in the 90s, even in a grunge band, and he's just so super talented. And I just kind of, next to him, anything I did just felt really inferior. So I never ever really kind of allowed myself to just embrace that gift that I had, which it is a gift to be able to teach yourself how to play guitar from a book in the library. I do have a natural aptitude for playing musical instruments. It's one of those things where if you've got something like Saturn and Pluto, which Saturn and Pluto is like fear and terror, that combination of having those two planets together are fear and terror, then that's kind of how you feel about creativity. However, when you go against, if you push and you keep trying, Saturn is the planet of mastery and Pluto is the planet of transformation. You can transform yourself through learning something, mastering it, particularly if it's a creative gift. And for me personally, part of my creative gift is doing a podcast, having a website, connecting with something like astrology, which is a symbolic system. It's a very creative craft, I think. I know people like to say it's a science. I don't know about that, but I do think it's a very creative thing. And I think that my gifts and my talents lie through embracing that fear and terror that I feel in my fifth house. The year that I decided to stop saying no to opportunities and started saying yes, actually I will say yes to opportunities. I was asked to do a talk on astrology, my first ever talk, and I was so close to saying no, and I was encouraged to do it. And I'm so glad, because I turned that into the year of yes, which turned into basically say yes to everything. And so I stopped saying no Saturn, no, and just started embodying this confident and keen to learn. And I'd make sure that every time I turned up to a talk, everybody knew that I was a newbie and that this was me just kind of sharing because I wanted to do it for fun, because I love it. And sometimes at the end of a talk, someone would go, oh, okay, we've got your fee for you. And I go, oh, I totally forgot I get paid to do this. It was, it's interesting what you can do if you do have planets that hinder your ability to have faith in yourself and allow you to truly go out there and be who you are. But fun and play is a very important thing to fifth house people. somebody with a very concentrated stellium of planets in the fifth house might actually find it a bit difficult to be serious. And, they might need to have work which enables them to be creative. And, I can speak from experience about this because I do have fifth house stuff. But I've got a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in my sixth house of work, which means I struggle a little bit with routine. Even though I'm a Capricorn, and this should be really good with routine, I find it really difficult to have a routine. However, my fifth house requires me to be creative. I need it. My moon in the fifth needs to be able to be creative and add a little personal touch to everything that I do, add my little stamp. So as long as I've got a job which allows me to be creative, to do a little bit of what I love, and allows me to not have to work so rigidly within a routine, I can be happy. I can be relatively happy doing what I do. So it's worth noting, if you've got anything that is counter serious in your chart, like a lot of fifth house stuff, and look at, how you can work that into ultimately bringing a bit of joy and fulfillment into your life. So that's kind of about the fifth house. There's so much more we could say about the fifth house, but I could go on forever. And I do not have all the time in the world, says the Capricorn. But we'll go over to the 11th house now, because the 11th house is kind of like the opposite place. And I suppose it's a good time to throw in this quote that I really like. It's not really a quote, it's actually song lyrics. I wonder if you'll recognise it. This really embodies the 11th and 5th house, or the 5th and the 11th, and I'm going to do it for you now. If you want to be my lover, you got to get with my friends. Yep, the Spice Girls. They are, and by the way, that was me doing my 5th house and actually singing. Not my best performance. Can you hear my Saturn speaking? However, I did a bit of 5th house for you. And, the 5th house is the house of lovers. So, not necessarily, the big, strong romances in our lives where we kind of meet that partner and want to, do our thing and, like go into like holy matrimony and all that follows. The 5th house can just be a place of, flings and fun. Meeting guys, meeting girls, experimenting with your sexuality, finding out about who you are, what pleases you. That's very 5th house. So the 5th house is kind of a house of sex as well, So it's an interesting aspect of creativity, is learning how you like to be creative in a sexual way as well. However, if you want to be my lover, you've got to get with my friends. Now, the 11th house is a very social house. And if you've got planets in the 11th, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's an incredibly, it's an area where you are, it's kind of like where you find your community. It's where you find the people who are like you. Now, the internet is very 11th house, I would say, particularly if you go on Facebook groups. That's totally 11th house stuff. Really 11th house stuff. Let's say Tinder is 5th house. If we're talking technological age here, Tinder is 5th house and Facebook groups is 11th house. Because you've got the, you're going, you're looking, you're flirting on Tinder. I've never used Tinder, by the way. I'm so curious. I keep saying to my boyfriend, please, can we create an account? I just want to know what it's all about. I don't know if anyone else is as curious and desperate to know about it as I am, or maybe you use it. I know some people who've met their, a friend of mine, she met her husband on Tinder. I know a few people have done that now. In fact, my boyfriend's brother and his girlfriend met on Tinder, and as I've said before, they're twins, and his girlfriend is actually born on the same day, born in the same year as them as well. So how weird that he met a girl who's basically got almost the exact same natal chart as him on Tinder. They met up for a date and now they're together, they got a baby. What what is that? How did that happen? So amazing. But aside from that, Tinder is very much a fun, flirtatious area. And then you've got your 11th house, which is Facebook groups and communities, for example. The Stellium Astrology community is an 11th house area. Going to astrology conferences as well. I think that's a very... When I went to India which I've recorded a show on that, which is going to come out soon. But when I went to India, I think I had Jupiter in my 11th house, my solar 11th. And maybe that's another conversation for another time, talking about solar houses. Yes, I'm going to write that down now. Solar houses. But just in a nutshell for you. In a nutshell, solar houses are when you put your sun on the ascendant and then you look at where all the planets are in each house in relation to if your sun was rising. So if you put Capricorn on the ascendant for me, then during the year I went to India, which is 2018, I had Jupiter in my 11th house of communities, and that's when I learned a lot about, and with Jupiter and Scorpio in the 11th house, I learned a lot about the more seedy side of communities. So yeah, you can imagine a bit of Jupiter in Scorpio. That was when Jupiter went into Scorpio. I think that's when all the stuff came out about Harvey Weinstein and all of that stuff in Hollywood. So on a personal level, when you're discovering something on a personal level that has been kind of on a collective level has been sort of thrown into the spotlight, like Harvey Weinstein, that coming out on the first day of Jupiter in Scorpio and all the Hollywood sort of sexual abuse stuff, when you've got that kind of transit going through, which has a collective vibe like that, and then you're experiencing that in your solar 11th house like I did, you pick up on undercurrents which are related to bigger picture stories like that. Just in a nutshell, can't go on too much of a waffle about that because I'd go on forever about it. But the sense of a community, now I must have said this before, I went to the London School of Astrology, usually hold a yearly boat trip down the Thames and back. It's always really good fun, and it's just funny because when you first get into astrology, it's a bit of I don't really know where to start looking. And then you get online. I mean, these days it's different to when I started even. But, you get online and you start discovering, there's astrology schools and there's this and there's that. But then when you get into the schools, you discover there's real massive communities of astrologers. And it's just such a sort of like a fringe subject. And it's really funny because when there was this first boat trip that I attended, which must have been in 2013 maybe, I turned up on Festival Pier, which is where we all congregate before we get onto the boat. And as I was walking towards Festival Pier, I looked over and I thought, oh my gosh, who are all these weirdos? Like brightly, not that I've got anything against brightly coloured hair. I also had brightly coloured hair at the point. I'd had bright red hair at that point. Like all these like funky clothing and just like proper oddball looking people. And as I got closer, I was like, oh, these are the astrologers. These are my people. These are the people that I really get. I was like, oh, it's my guys. So it's quite funny because look at the communities you're involved with. Look at the things on Facebook, like the groups that you're in, that you're kind of involved with, and the people that you relate to, and the ones that you're really active in are probably going to be more telling about the type of community involvement you enjoy. But what do you get from a community? What is it that you get from these associations and from these relationships with other people? It's more a sense of, being able to share what you have, maybe sharing that gift that you've developed in the 5th house, that individual quality that really makes you who you are, like allows you to shine like the star that you are. To be honest, in a community like an 11th house community, it's often about our own unique blend of what makes us who we are. So in a community, you'll meet some people who, especially in like an astrology community, you've got a friend who does psychological astrology, and they use a typical, Huber house system. And then you go to, there's another person who does Hellenistic astrology, and they use whole sign house systems. And then you've got somebody who does horary astrology, and they use Regiomontanus. Every single one of them's got a different approach. They've got a different way of seeing the world because they've all got their own individual ascendants, their own Mars sign, their own Mercury sign, their own sun sign. They're all different people with different approaches to one subject, one umbrella subject that kind of puts you all together in that situation at that time. And through that experience, you make connections, you discover that other people have resources that are going to benefit you at some point, and you decide that maybe you want to collaborate. It may be that you get more out of it, and you form very close friendships with these people. And it's not just about collaborating, it's not just about working together with people. I'm probably very Capricorn about this when I tell you this stuff. But it's actually also about, real friendships of people that you meet. If you've got lots of stuff going on in your 11th house, you're usually somebody who's often called upon because, your friends either are quite demanding, or you just love the social scene. So if you're not working with somebody in some kind of context, it could be that actually the way that you're called upon is that they always want you around because you always just have so much fun together. It's like a kind of playing on your own in the 5th house, developing your own tastes, your own styles, the things that you like in that sand pit when you're building up that sandcastle. Maybe somebody with a bit of, I'm thinking of Elf now. I wish I could remember what Will Ferrell had on his. I'm writing his name down so I can Google it. But I wish I could remember what he had on his 5th house cusp, because when I'm thinking about Elf, and he built the Empire State Building out of Lego, it's like, how do you play? What do you use to play? What are you building? And where are you playing in the first place? But you're doing it on your own, versus where we all meet to go out, where you get together with your friends to socialise, the subjects that you socialise over. It might be that you've got a particular group of friends that you're just going out all the time for, a bit like Sex and the City, the 4 girls that get together and they're always talking about what's going on in their love lives. They support each other through some tough stuff, and they've got, some of them have, Miranda had a baby, and so her life went in one direction that she wasn't expecting, and Samantha just continued to be, a bit of a cougar. But they all come together, they're all individuals, and they all come together and they've got their individual skill sets, which bring interest to the conversations, variety to the conversations, but also on top of that bring a sense of when you've got someone go, oh, I know somebody who can do that, I know a car mechanic, he's my friend's husband, he'd definitely help you out with your car. Or you need legal advice, I just happen to know a solicitor who can give you a hand with that. It's our extended resources and what we can bring together. And I kind of connect the 11th house. So we've got the 9th house, which is there's a sense of broadcasting. But with the 11th house, I think there's a sense of social media. So you may recognise what I'm saying as well if you happen to have a lot of stuff in Aquarius, which I have a stellium in Aquarius. So I'm relating to this as well as somebody with a stellium in Aquarius. I know how all of my personal planets are in Aquarius. And it's not like a tight triple conjunction that I've got or anything, but I've got my Mercury, Venus, midheaven and Mars. And the reason that is a stellium is because the Mars placement. If it was just Venus and Mercury and even the Sun, the 3 of those, that wouldn't be considered a stellium because they're always really close together. However, it's Venus, Mercury and Mars, which is considered to be a stellium, because Mars, it's not often that Mars finds itself as close to the Sun. It's a much slower moving placement to Venus and Mercury and the Sun. And so Venus, Mercury and Sun usually travel together. But actually, my social engagements have always been so important to me. I used to prioritise my friends like they were like my family, and I still do. My friendships are so important to me. And what I'm doing here, where I'm sharing with my community of listeners, every single one of you is so important to me. The ones who've contacted me, who wanted to say hello and share how much you're enjoying the podcast. Oh, I got a lovely message the other day from somebody who I still need to respond to. By the way, you guys, I've just had a weekend of just doing nothing because I absolutely needed it. It's just so nice that I'm getting people who are saying how much they love this podcast, and it's like the joy it brings me to be reaching out to my community through a technological means that didn't even exist until the internet kind of became around 1993, and even then it took years for something like a podcast to even get off the ground. It just amazes me to think that I can be embodying that truly Aquarian ability, which, like I said, with the 11th house is very connected to sort of like Aquarius and Uranus, because Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, but also a little bit Saturn as well, because Saturn is the traditional ruler. And Saturn can have his positivities, his perks, as well as his drawbacks, like every planet. So it's one of those things where, social media, alternative ways of connecting with other people. I think nowadays with social media and with the internet, we do find it a lot easier to be able to connect with people in a long distance. And Aquarius is very much connected with distance as well. It's a sign, and Uranus, it's very much a sign which describes needing space. So it can be people who are like, and I think maybe 2020 may have been a year where we really embraced, well, Saturn did dip in very briefly to Aquarius, and then at the end of the year went in, but embracing that sense of social distancing and working online and really dispersed teams, homeworking, that kind of thing. It's very interesting to think about how we suddenly shifted into something different, and we did have Saturn enter the early degrees of Aquarius and then go retrograde and come back out. And I think that happened in around, I think it was like April time. And then when it dipped back out, we still continued with that, but we were like refining the processes. Those dispersed teams, connecting with your colleagues via Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever you used when you did that, if you did that. But then also, what about the people that weren't working? What about the people that were furloughed? They were, connecting with people using WhatsApp, they were using Facebook, they were using Instagram. TikTok went wild. Oh gosh, I have to say, I think TikTok's a very fifth house, very Leo thing, because you've got to be very creative to stand out on TikTok. And it's very self-driven. And there's a lot of people that have really found success through using TikTok. And it's I think it's a company, an Indian company actually, isn't it? And India is a very Leo Capricorn country. It's very, very Leo Capricorn. I think there's a real sense of performance. Look at Bollywood, for example. It's so Leo, it's so dramatic. I love watching Bollywood films. I don't know if I always like, I don't make a point of always sitting down and watching them, but when I do, I just love it. When I was in the Philippines as well, there was a really great show on. There's some TV shows where the drama is so magnified that you just kind of, it's just awe-inspiring. And I have to say, with Bollywood films, the drama is enhanced, isn't it? Magnified, really, really. They really play on the kind of like the theatrical aspect of performance. And it's interesting how 2020 kind of made us transition from, meeting each other in person and socialising face to face to having to learn how to socialise in a very different way. For example, my boyfriend, who has an 11th house Moon Mars conjunction, and that Moon Mars conjunction is squared by Neptune. He used to go to the football every weekend. By the way, his Moon Mars conjunction is in Aries as well. So he used to go to the football every weekend, and then when this all hit, he would do virtual pub. So he would get together with his family online and watch the football while he was with his family. And I know loads of people that have done this. I know he thinks he invented it, but so many people did it. And so they watch the football together at a distance. They're still connecting over that thing that they love. It's like a really interesting way of like adapting to having that need to connect with the people that you have those similarities with, in a sense, or the need to talk about that thing that you love, or just to connect with your community. But through the and for him, with Neptune being the ruler of, again, like that kind of feet thing that I was talking about, there's a sense of really needing to tune into the football and get that Mars aggression out. There's this need for that group activity. I don't think our relationship would have lasted as long if I hadn't been able to see his natal chart and understand that he absolutely needs this, because it drives me bonkers. I'm not like I'm a good girl. I am a good girlfriend, but it's if you've got somebody who's sort of like is obsessively into something and you think, I don't get it. Why do you love it so much? Why do you have to be such a pundit? And why does it always have to be, you've got to go there? It's always like with the guys. But then you see Moon Mars conjunction in Aries, of course that's going to be a need to like experience that competition. In the 11th house, you've got to get together with your community, and with that square to Neptune, it's going to be drinking and football. Might not necessarily always be those things, but for him that's how it's developed. Now, I guess while I was saying this, one of the things that really made me one of the things I failed to mention about the 11th house is that it's very tribal. I think there's a sense of finding your tribe about the 11th house, and that's maybe back in the old days when there were more tribal societies, before we kind of developed into this kind of new world order type thing, where we're all kind of working for the machine, and everything's kind of rules for everybody. There is this sense of tribalism about the 11th house. And if you think about things like football and huge sports, when you go to a stadium and you all wear like the same coloured jersey. I know I've talked about when I went to America, to New York, and I went to a New York Giants game. My boyfriend has always had his New York Giants jersey. And yesterday we went, where did we go yesterday? Was it yesterday? I can't remember where we went. We got in the car and we went somewhere. And he put I hadn't seen him wear it for ages, his New York Giants jersey. And I thought, that brings back memories. I haven't seen you wear that for ages. Because when you're lying around the house like lockdown, you're not going to get all dressed up for nothing. Well, I have to say, sometimes that's quite nice. But like today, I've put on a full face of makeup. Did I need to? No, but I'm doing it. Why? Because I want to. That's why. So, some days you just do it, don't you? But yeah, he hasn't worn his Giants jersey for ages. And I remembered getting to the stadium and suddenly looking around and seeing everybody wearing football jerseys, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so surreal, because I've seen him wearing his football jersey constantly. He loves his Giants jersey. And then when we were going up the escalators to our side of the stadium, every single person was wearing the same sort of jersey as him, and I was like, oh my god, he's come home. This is the motherland for him. And as I peered through, there was a little gap in the stadium, in the kind of like peering onto the pitch, and I could see down, and there was an ocean of blue New York Giant jerseys. And I was like, wow, this is the most surreal experience. And getting there, sitting on this, we had quite a tucked away seat quite high up, and it was absolutely, I'm going to say it, bollock freezing. I was so cold. It was brass monkeys, as the Cockneys would say. And so I was absolutely freezing. Didn't really bring the appropriate clothing for New York. But he was having the time of his life, and I was just looking around, and he was really getting into it. And there's that 11th house sense of tribalism where we have to connect with people who almost, it's like that saying of blood is thicker than water. Like I've said with Aquarius, that doesn't always count. I would say with the 11th house, this also doesn't count. You could be somebody who's lucky to have a family who you share interests with and you love to socialise with, but it could be that the 11th house is your family from your brother from another mother, your sister from another mister, the family that you kind of are adopted into because you've got related interests, or you connect with them in a way that is you almost share something that is stronger than a blood connection. So also, like depending on what planets you've got in your 11th house, so say it is like a Moon Mars conjunction, there will be a need to get together, and there will be a need to blow off steam, to get together and rant, or to get together and shout at people on a football pitch. There's endless possibilities. But if you can think about, maybe I like to think of the seesaw of the 5th house being the actor on the stage, and then on the opposite side you've got the audience who are enthralled and completely glued to whatever the actor's doing. So you could think of it like in a football stadium, you've got the players on the pitch, and then you've got the 11th house, which is literally, so you can say that it's like a house of teamwork. In a sense, the players on the pitch have an 11th house mission together, but the people in the audience that are watching are having their own very much individual 11th house experience. It's almost a sense of connectedness. So it's very interesting, the 11th house, and it's always very hard to kind of connect. I always find that the 11th and 12th houses are actually quite difficult houses to really understand. But if you have something happen to you, like one of my teachers, Richard Swatton, he said, say you were at a bus stop and somebody came up to the people at the bus stop and started having a go at somebody, and then everybody gets together and says, what do you think you're doing, and kind of like gangs up on that one person, protects the one that's being threatened, and then that person disappears off and everybody gets together and goes, what on earth was his problem? And that's a very 11th house thing. You suddenly form a camaraderie around you with the people who you've maybe not met before, and you find a way to connect, and in this case, in this scenario, protect that person. And you may disband and never see each other again. You might not even be at a bus stop you normally wait at, but it's that sense of community that you find with the 11th house, where you find something that brings you together and build relationships in that way. So a few other things I think are kind of 5th house, 11th house sort of things that we can kind of relate it to. There's personal and collective authority. I've got to put my teeth in. Art versus science. So yes, definitely art is a very 5th house area, and the 11th house could be more connected to more scientific ideals. Not always, but I like that kind of thing. It's much more, if you're looking at it from a Uranian or a Aquarian way, maybe a bit more technological. Freedom of expression versus autonomy, or freedom of expression and autonomy. I think that, you can find a sense of really wanting to do things your own way with the 5th and the 11th. Play and playmates, actor and audience, Sun versus Uranus, and then I've got in brackets Saturn. And then we've got fire versus air again. So these are very active houses. They're very openly expressive. They're very masculine in their essence, being quite active and very demonstrative and obvious about how they display how planets can be displayed in these houses as well. So it's interesting and always fun to explore. And what you see with your 11th house is often how your friends experience you. So maybe you might not relate to the planet on the cusp of the 11th, because it might be that you project that onto your friends. But actually think about how your friends perceive you with the planet that's on the cusp of your 11th house. With mine, I think it is using equal house. It's Aries, which means that my Mars in Aquarius is activated. And I know I am that one that they all call me Phoebe from Friends. I'm the Phoebe from Friends, the weird, quirky one who, does it my own way. That Mars, Aries quality, very unique and individual in what I do. So yeah, it's an interesting, fun thing to look at. How do you connect with your special creative ability? Is astrology the thing for you, or are you much more of a dancer, or are you into acting, or maybe you're actually into like painting, or maybe it's not about that necessarily artistic expression, but maybe it's about being around people who can help you to connect with that sense of yourself. I know for me astrology is a big one. Having Scorpio in my 5th house, having my sun in the 8th house, it's always going to be things like astrology and occult type things, tarot, but having an Aquarius stellium as well, it's going to be quirky, going to be different. So think about that in your own chart. Now I thought I just had a quick glance at some listener charts. I tell you what, just very quickly, I did mention Erica at the beginning. She's a Patreon. So she's got sun in the 9th house. She's got Aries on her 11th house cusp actually, so that makes Mars, which is at 0 Aries in her 10th house, definitely how her friends might experience her. So she might be the sporty spice, she might be the energetic, fun leader of the group, who maybe not necessarily leads in a not necessarily like a, taking control and being bossy, but maybe just does her own thing and people can't help but follow, because that's what Aries is like. They lead by example. They don't necessarily tell everybody what to do. They just do what they want, and then people go, actually, I quite like I'll have what she's having. But her Mars is in conjunction with Venus, which happens to be on the cusp of her 5th house, which is Libra. And she has, so Libra on the 5th house cusp. Libra is naturally quite a sign that seeks balance and harmony and beauty. There's a sense of law about Venus. There's a sense of fairness or a lack thereof with Venus or with Libra, and we have to kind of re-establish that equality, that what's fair for everybody, that kind of justice. So Erica might enjoy for her pastimes, indulging in. It could be that there's a beauty is something that she likes, or something that's connected to femininity in some way. It could be fine arts, for example. Usually with Venus, with Libra, I don't know why, maybe because I'm a musician and I also have that on my 5th house cusp, music and playing instruments and like learning how to strike a sense of beauty out of sound, that kind of thing, for example. However, she does have Saturn and Pluto in her 5th house, which is kind of what I was saying to you guys about myself. Erica, you have got practically the exact same Saturn and Pluto as me. You've got Saturn at 4, mine's at 3, and you've got Pluto at 29, 21. I think I've got the exact same Pluto placement as you. Yes, I think I do. Wow, look at us. Look at us. Erica's 25th of Feb 1983, born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And her birth time is 10:35 Eastern Standard Time. So, me talking about that Saturn and Pluto in the 5th house, there can be a sense of like really fearing to tap into what your creative gifts. It can be a real struggle with it. However, they both trine your sun in Pisces in the 9th house. So there's a positive relationship with Saturn and Pluto, even though they do put a bit of a dampener on things sometimes when they sit in your 5th. So there is an ability to, and a very creative, very dreamy sun in Pisces in the 9th house. This is somebody who really looks for a sense of meaning in life, and part of the journey is about discovering, probably discovering yourself in the 9th house. And there's a sense of faith about the 9th house as well. So that's interesting enough as it is. I feel like you will go through many personal transformations. You have a positive relationship with Pluto and Saturn, even though they can and probably have in your youth hindered your ability to really find your own personal self-expression, and you probably had to work really hard to fight for your own individual creativity, or at least fight for the ability to express yourself and to be respected for what you do, because somebody with a 5th house Saturn will be serious about what they love to do. And actually, that Mars and Venus conjunction that you've got in Aries sitting in your 10th house, being very important because they rule the cusp of your 11th and your 5th house, mean that, connecting with a community, connecting with people who have shared interests with you, you'll kind of they share your goals and your visions, and people that see value in your creative gifts. This will be brought into what you do as far as career is concerned. So it might be that you have to have a very self-directed career with Mars in Aries in the 10th, and that with Venus in Aries in the 10th, which speaks to that 11th and 5th house seesaw, you definitely need to there needs to be a sense of play, sense of creativity, sense of individuality about what you do. Perhaps a little bit, oh gosh, you've got a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in your 6th house as well. Routine is going to be difficult for you. Gosh, we've got very similar charts, not completely the same, but very similar. Oh, and you've got a Leo moon as well, so there's a strong need for individuality and independence. And with that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, that's an extremely difficult one to have in your 6th house. I feel sorry it's a great conjunction, but in your 6th house, it's a difficult place, because for people who need routine and like to have that predictability about what they do, I think it's a real struggle, because you can't. And if something becomes a grind and it becomes too monotonous, it can make you feel quite unwell. It can make you feel very run down and depressed. It's quite challenging. So, Erica, wow, your chart is not exactly the same as mine. We've got lots of differences, but it's interesting that we've both got Gemini ascendant. We've both got some similar house placements. So maybe you, probably more than most people, will have connected with this show today, just hearing some of my own little stories. Curious to know whether or not you're really into sports because of that Aries on the 11th house cusp. You might not be, because I'm not overly into... I do like sports. I'm more of a player than a spectator. But, you've got that Venus-Mars conjunction, which is very... they enjoy the sense of competition. Venus softens Mars and Mars hardens Venus. So together they're quite a fusion. Venus can soften and add a diplomacy to Mars, and Mars can add that kind of assertiveness and a challenge about Venus. So yeah, I think that's interesting. I feel like that your chart actually is a very strong chart, which describes a sense of, because you've got Moon in Leo opposite your midheaven and Mercury in Aquarius, so you've already got that Leo Aquarius seesaw going on, and then you've got that Mars Venus conjunction in the 10th house, which rules your 11th and your 5th house cusp. So you've got that sense of needing that element of play, and that community involvement, the sociability aspect. So it's funny, because I did have another chart chosen to discuss today, and then my eye just got drawn to yours. So sorry to the person that lost out. I won't say who it was, but we will talk about you in another show, I promise. Okay, so that's kind of it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's like I said, I find certain houses much more difficult to explore. The mutable houses, so the 3rd, the 9th, the 6th and the 11th, the 6th and the 12th, are generally a little harder to pin down, mutable in their quality. You kind of can imagine when you break a bit of eggshell into your eggs, trying to get that shell out kind of runs away from you. I feel like that's a bit of a mutability thing. But yeah, I also think the 11th house is a bit more difficult. You can say it's a social house, but can we elaborate on that a little bit maybe? It's a bit difficult to really convey the depth of how we interact with other people and what a community really means to us. And it's so much more than that as well. So, like I said, explore your own chart, check out some of those books I recommended at the beginning. I do have links to books that I recommend in the blog posts that I put out, and I'm really crap at putting blog posts out on time. By the way, you guys, I'm going to be relaunching this podcast on YouTube, so if you happen to have a YouTube login, which I'm sure anybody who has internet and phones in their pockets has YouTube, I think I'm Stellium Astrology on YouTube. I guess I'll put a link to it in the description so you guys can find me. I did start making videos about it must have been 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more than that, and then decided to, I wasn't in a place where I was able to carry on with it, whereas I'm getting into it now. A lot of my Patreon content is video content, and this podcast is going to be re-released on YouTube at some point. So it's exciting for me to be getting that all set up as well, to have a relaunch. So I will announce when, but not anytime too soon. If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to rate and review and subscribe on iTunes or any platform that you're on. Putting a review down would be absolutely wonderful, and I do find them eventually. And one last quote, which I kind of like for Aquarius, really. But actually I like the idea of the 5th and 11th house seesaw, is an Oscar Wilde quote saying, "Never love anybody who treats you like you're ordinary." And I think that that's a nice 5th house, 11th house thing, because you have to be extraordinary in somebody's eyes in order for them to really truly love you, because how can you love somebody who's just bland? you know, there's something that makes that person shine to you. So, and that goes for friendships too, not just romantic love. I like that 5th house, 11th house kind of connotation that I've sort of tuned into. So, yep, guys, hope you liked it. Please check out your own charts, have a look at what you've got going on. Obviously, get in touch with me if you want to say hi, Stephanie with an F, Stefanie, at stelliumastrology.com. I do respond to my emails. And by the way, if you have signed up to the mailing list, make sure that you've marked me as a recognised sender, because sometimes my emails just go into the spam. And I hate that, but it's just what happens. It's really annoying, and I don't really know how to stop it. So, yeah, that would be really helpful. All right, you guys, take care, and I'll speak to you next time.